Religion and science differ over a very fundamental question. Are we each an enduring consciousness independent of our physical bodies that existed before we were born and will continue to exist after we die? Or are we nothing more than a bunch of biological cells and will cease to exist when our bodies die? If people believe their consciousness exists independent of their physical bodies, they can live with less fear of dying and more concern about how they treat others as they think about their purpose in life and the idea of karma. Unfortunately, the scientific establishment has attacked the concept of enduring independent consciousness as unscientific and unworthy of smart, sophisticated people. Mainstream scientists who follow the orthodoxy believe the universe is comprised of particles that can be arranged somehow to create consciousness. Some people call those scientists gritologists because it's all about grit, particles. Consciousness is just a function of the particles that make up the brain. It can't be separated from the body. As a result, mainstream scientists dismiss reports of out-of-body travel as mind-generated fantasy. And yet, I've done video interviews with people who have solid, verifiable evidence that they were actually out of body. But gritologists don't want to hear about it. Fortunately, physicists I worked with took the concept of enduring consciousness out of the realm of religion and spirituality into the realm of science with quantum physics experiments that are currently being performed at various universities, starting with the California State Polytechnic University at Pomona. We proposed the experiments in a peer-reviewed paper in a quantum physics journal. I was included with the scientists as a co-author due to my role as researcher and voice of the layman. The experiments test the theory that consciousness comes first, that physical reality is a consciousness-created virtual simulation. One way to look at it is that we're like players inhabiting avatars in a kind of video game created by a greater unified consciousness. Fully immersed in the game, it's kind of a dream that we wake up from when our bodies die. The theory is that the greater consciousness divided itself into individual pieces to have experiences from different angles to evolve the quality of each individual consciousness, to help evolve the quality of the greater consciousness. That may sound like a far-fetched idea to you, but consider mainstream science's explanation for the existence of the universe. Their Big Bang theory says that the universe began as a tiny point of almost infinite density and temperature, where all the matter and energy of the universe was compressed and then exploded. That could be consciousness just booting up the game. But gritologists scoff at the idea that a consciousness could have been the beginning, while they're content to ignore questions about where all the matter came from and why and how was it compressed to begin with. The idea that the Big Bang generated particles is all that matters. Well, maybe. But the Big Bang theory, which originally grew out of a desire to match physics with the creation story in the Bible, does not explain the behavior of particles at the subatomic level, while the simulation hypothesis does. Or at least that's what the lead physicist on our paper is trying to demonstrate with the experiments. His name is Tom Campbell. As a young physicist, Tom was invited to meet Bob Monroe, a businessman who had been having out-of-body experiences and wanted to team up with scientists to figure out what was happening. So Tom agreed to help create the Monroe Institute if Monroe would teach him how to do out-of-body travel. They made the deal, and after some years of going out of body and teaching others to do it, Tom left the Institute to spend the next 30 years in his spare time going out of body, investigating the nature of reality with the rigor of a physicist. The culmination of that work was Tom's trilogy about his simulation hypothesis, presented as a TOE, which is a physics acronym for theory of everything. To understand Campbell's proposed experiments, we need to look at a belief by scientists ever since the birth of quantum physics in the early 1900s. The physicists knew that light acts as a wave when shown through a barrier that has two slits in it. It's like waves of water going through two slits, where the waves interfere with each other, causing highs and lows. Light registers with the same interference pattern. However, quantum physicists also said that photons that comprise light will act like particles if a measurement is made to determine which slit the photons go through. As a result, many famous physicists said that conscious observation, causing light to act like a physical particle, means that consciousness is the driving force in creating material reality. But for almost a century, gritology-inclined physicists have claimed that consciousness can't have anything to do with it, and the measurement devices themselves must somehow be transforming the probability waves into particles. However, that argument was proven wrong by an ingenious 1998 variation of the double-slit experiment, which also tends to support Tom Campbell's theory. The delayed choice quantum eraser experiment eliminated measurement devices from detecting which path information until after the photons hit the screen. There's no way the detection devices could physically affect the photon on its way to register as a wave or particle. Here's how they did it. When the photon goes through slit A or B, it hits a crystal that generates a pair of entangled photons. The signal photon goes directly to the screen, while its entangled companion, called the idler, heads for a prism that sends it on one of two paths depending on which slit the photon originally went through. If the idler is on the slit B path, it will hit a half-silvered mirror and either get deflected to detector number 4 or it will pass through the mirror. In the same way, if the idler is on the slit A path, it will hit a half-silvered mirror, and 50% of the time it will either get deflected to detector number 3 or it will pass through the mirror. In other words, if the idler hits D4 or D3, we have which path's information, so the signal photon will register in a particle pattern. If the idler doesn't get reflected by the half-silvered mirrors and goes through to what's called the eraser section, it will bounce around and randomly hit either D2 or D1, which effectively erases or obfuscates the which path information, and the signal photon will register in a wave pattern. Either way, the signal photon's determination as a wave or particle is accomplished without it ever physically encountering a detection device. As can be seen when the signal photon locations on the screen are plotted with the times of detection of the idler photons. That confirmation for observation as critical in forming reality is important, but it's not the most important result of this experiment. That's because the idler photons take such a longer route to detection that their observation or obfuscation of which path information happens 8 nanoseconds after the signal photon has already registered on the screen. Such a result appears to show that what is observed in the present will determine what happened 8 nanoseconds in the past. Rather than some kind of time travel, Campbell interprets the results to show that particles will appear when needed to render into the reality of an observer, but will remain as mere probabilities until there is an observer. It fits with Campbell's analogy with a video game, where the player's view in a particular direction is only rendered when the player looks in that direction. In other words, both video games and the consciousness-created reality render worlds in the most efficient way. The point of all this is that science and religion should now be able to agree that there are at least rational reasons to believe that there could be a godlike, universal, unified consciousness, and that individual parts of it could operate like the eternal souls referenced in religions.